Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, last week I made a video with this pedal here, the Boss TB-2w Tonebender. And it was a really popular video. I kind of anticipated that a little bit because this is a pedal that a lot of people know about and are curious to hear. But yeah, the figures on that video were astronomical for the first 48 hours at least. And I mentioned at the end of it that this is a really good pedal, but it's not necessarily my favourite Tonebender out there. And if you don't or can't get hold of one of these, then you're not really missing out on a genuine Mark II experience, because a lot of people build similar pedals that are, in my opinion, of equal stature, in terms of sonics at least, to the Boss Sola Sound collaboration here. And that got me thinking, because in that video I also mentioned that this isn't my pedal, I haven't bought this, I've borrowed this from my mate Nick Williams. And of course Nick also builds amazing fuzz pedals based on this particular circuit. And as it turns out, my favourite Mark II type pedal I've ever played is this, Nick's Professional Mark II. And this one has the original new old stock Mullard OC81D transistors in it, which were used in the original. And all of the components in here are vintage. It's just a meticulously built, incredible piece of kit. It really is a time capsule inside this in terms of how Nick's put it together and the components he's used. All the capacitors and resistors, everything is just left over from the 60s, and it sounds absolutely phenomenal. So before I send back the TB-2w to Nick, I wanted to put these two pedals side by side. And to be honest, there's no great reason for doing that aside from my own personal curiosity, because in my head, this is my favourite Mark II type pedal I've ever played. But I wanted to see how this actually stacks up when you put them side by side in a perfectly fair test. So what I'm going to do today, folks, is two bits of playing. And in those bits of playing, I'm going to try and match these pedals in terms of the attack and the level as closely as I can. Because there's a couple of fundamental differences between these two pedals right off the bat, that if we just set the knobs in exactly the same place on both, all we're going to hear is those differences. It's not really going to tell us anything. So Nick's pedal has a lot more gain to it than the Boss. So for the first excerpt of playing, I'm going to turn the attack on Nick's pedal all the way down, and I'm then going to try and match the attack and the kind of gain and the sag characteristics on the Boss pedal. And I think from memory the attack is about kind of 2 o'clock, and that matches Nick's pedal with the attack all the way down. And then in the second bit of playing, I'm going to max the attack on the Boss and try and match that on Nick's. And again, from memory, I think it's about 2 o'clock on this, matches full attack on the Boss, if that makes any sort of sense. But also the output level of the Boss is a tiny, tiny hair higher than Nick's pedal. So I'm going to max the level on Nick's pedal, which is kind of what you do with Tonebenders. It's kind of unity-ish with the level flat out. And on this, I'm going to max the level and just nudge it back a little bit to the point it matches up more closely with Nick's pedal. Because again, otherwise all we're going to hear is a level difference, and that disguises any tonal EQ differences, and it doesn't really tell us much. So by keeping the two settings as equal as possible, that's going to give us as direct a comparison as possible between these two pedals. Now, as I said, inside Nick's pedal we have Mullard OC81D transistors, 3 of them, which is the transistor most closely associated with the first iteration of this pedal. Now, inside this pedal, I'm not going to take this apart, it's not my pedal, it's very expensive. But fortunately online, and I have written this down, a channel called Grey Bench Electronics has done exactly that. And it shows on that video exactly what is inside this pedal. So the 3 transistors in here are T05 or TO-5 transistors, which are new old stock germanium transistors, but they're not particularly known for being used in fuzz pedals, certainly Mark II Tonebenders. And if you think about it, the OC81Ds in Nick's pedal are basically unobtainium. You're not really going to find any of those nowadays unless you know where to look, and you'll get them in very small numbers. there were 3,000 of these pedals made and 3 of those transistors in each. So there was at least 9,000 of those T05s knocking about. Probably a lot more once you account for leakage and some being in the wrong gain range and all of that. Boss must have got hold of at least 10,000 of those transistors. So they are new old stock germanium transistors, but they're not particularly known for being used in tone benders, and they're not super rare by definition of finding 10,000 of the things. And also the construction of this pedal uses surface mount components. And in the gut shot you'll see on screen now, you'll notice 2 things. Firstly, the components are absolutely tiny compared to Nick's because they're printed by a computer using surface mount technology. And that's a whole debate unto itself. Does surface mount make a difference to how a pedal sounds and behaves? The only 2 things people can really agree on is surface mount tends to be lower noise than old through-hole components, and also the quality and the construction of the components matters more in simple circuits than complex circuits. So if you take something like a Rangemaster, the exact resistors you use in there will have a noticeable effect on the sound. If you take something, I opened up an Origin Effects Revival drive a while ago, and there's probably 200 surface mount components in there. Moving one to a through-hole component wouldn't really make any difference. So the more complex the circuit, the less the exact type of component matters. Now, a tone bender is a fairly simple circuit, but you'll also notice inside here that there's a lot more components in here than Nick's pedal. But as far as I'm aware, and listening to that Grey Bench electronics video as well kind of helped me kind of make my mind up on this, there's a lot more in this circuit than just the fuzz element, because of course you get the switchable output control from through true bypass to a buffered bypass. You also get the battery kind of voltage sag control here, and like a relay for the buffered bypass switching. There's a lot more in here than an old school tone bender circuit that isn't actually anything to do with the fuzz. So don't let how complex the circuit board in this pedal is deceive you, because it's not all to do with the fuzz. Very few parts of it actually control the gain and the saturation of this pedal. But some important differences there between the transistors and the construction and all of that. But that's a very long rambling intro for just putting 2 pedals alongside each other to see how they compare. And I'm also going to use a tweed amp today, because somebody in the comments on that first video says to really hear a Mark II you have to use a tweed amp. So I have a tweed amp here, so I'm going to use that for the second bit of playing, just to keep that commenter happy. So without further ado folks, here we go. there we are, folks. Now, please do comment underneath. Let me know what you thought of these two pedals today. Which was your favourite? Which do you think sounded best into each of the different amplifiers today? Which screamed quintessential Mark II to you more than the other? I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks down in the comments section. Now, first off, I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised at how close these two pedals sounded in a lot of ways. Because when I demoed this, to me, I had an idea in my head of what this pedal sounded like without putting them side by side. And this didn't quite match up to it in my head. Putting them alongside each other, they are more similar than I actually thought they were. But that said, there are some fundamental differences between them. Firstly, as I said in the intro, the gain range is in a slightly different place. The Boss pedal has less gain than the Williams, so that's why the attack knob was in different positions today to really try and kind of match how much kind of sag and gain there was within these two pedals. So that's the first difference, but I think the most overwhelming one was the Williams pedal has a good amount more low end in it, and to my ears, more harmonic complexity. When you hit especially a single note lower down on a lower string, it just kind of fizzes and wants to go into feedback a lot quicker than this pedal does, even though the gain and the volume was matched as closely as I could do it today in the room. So this is just a richer sounding pedal. This in comparison sounds a little bit thinner in the low end. It's tighter in the low end too, which may or may not be a good thing for you depending on your preference, but it's also got a bit more kind of cut to it. It's a bit more sizzly on top. Again, maybe a good or bad thing depending on what you want to get out of a Mark II Tonebender. But I think the most important difference between these two pedals, for the purposes of this video, is you can buy this. You can go on Nick's website. This costs, I think, £279 with Mullard OC81D transistors in it. This, I think, was £340 new and goes for almost double that on the second-hand market. So you can get hold of these if you know where to look, but it's going to cost you a lot more than this pedal with original Mullard OC81D transistors in it. This has the collectability factor, this is a smaller form factor, this is a Boss pedal in collaboration with Sola Sound. It's called a Tonebender because they're allowed to do that. But this is available, it sounds every bit as good as this, and for a lot of people, myself included, it's more usable. I like the thicker sound. I like this pedal into clean amplifiers, which, you know, might make a difference. You might want a tighter low end and more cut if you're using it into a gainy amplifier. But for me, I love the richness of this pedal. But as always, folks, that's just my thoughts. So please do let me know yours underneath. I love getting your opinions on all this sort of stuff. So thank you ever so much for watching, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful to you in some way. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a big difference when you hit subscribe. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.